All right, welcome in everybody. It is time for Full Court Press. Hope everyone had a great weekend. And Rob, I had a pretty good weekend. I ended up getting a nice win with Siena yesterday. Of course, it's always a when they win and I bet them, that's a double great day for me. But it goes the other way. If I were to bet them and they would lose, it would be double bad day. But yesterday we get in there. I only played for Sunday. A win with the Siena Saints. They win and cover easily. 2-1 on Saturday for me, and then a pretty good week overall. So, Robino, how was your weekend, and what else you got going on?
I was like you yesterday, just one play. I didn't like much on the board, Adam. I thought the lines were pretty good. And then in retrospect, we always have our list that we shave down. In retrospect, if I had left a couple extras on, would have had some winners, but that's okay. We'll take the 1-0. It was the Wisconsin Badgers at home against Iowa. Lay 2.5, win by 13. So good news there. Saturday's card came up as a minus, and two big ones that really dictated my day, Adam, were the Cal State Northridge team total over, which we used on last call with Kelly, destined to get to 95 the whole way, and just on the brakes for the last 8 minutes. Kind of strange out of Northridge to do that, but they land 78, a little bit short. And hooked to start the day with Valparaiso and Illinois Chicago, I believe it was, over 138.5, got to 138. A couple missed free throws, and you have the difference in your day. But overall, pretty good. Friday was nice. So again, season's been great. Top 5 spot in amongst WagerTalk handicappers for the entire season. Number 2 since December 1st. 2 months of plus 43 units, I think. So we're not going to complain at this time of year, but eventually, I think I remember way back when we started, used to say, these things are going to start to go your way. And eventually you remember them when they hurt, but they do go the other way. And you tend to just count those as winner. Oh yeah, that was just an easy winner by half a point.
Yeah.
It kind of strains the mind of a sports bettor, but we'll get to it today on how short could they make this card for us, Adam? Dear Lord.
Yeah, they got, well, let's get right into it. And Ocho, we will, Total Bases will be back. And actually, I believe we're going to go to 6 days a week on Total Bases as well, Monday through Saturday. So we'll be back. Pitchers and well, actually, we started playing spring training games this weekend, Rob. Baseball is that close, where there was spring training being played, I think, as early as Friday or Saturday. They started to play. I usually start to watch spring training, like really watch the games like mid-March. When guys have gotten a couple of reps in, now some of the pitchers are getting stretched out. So I won't watch a ton of spring training ball before then. Too locked in on college basketball to do that. And so let's lock in on this slate. Rob, yeah, you mentioned they gave us 2 huge games with like top 25 teams. So we've got 2 big time matchups, and then like the lowest of the low extra board type, couple Southland, maybe a SWAC. So really no in between. It is 2 blockbuster games for Monday on Big Monday. And then I think 6 extra board games. Let's start with, they're both pretty big games. Let's start with the sort of feature of the day. Out at Allen Fieldhouse. Rob, amazingly, and this got some run when Kansas knocked off Arizona without Darren Peterson. Bill Self, I don't believe he's ever lost on Big Monday at Allen Fieldhouse. I think it's something like 40-0. A crazy run on Monday night home games for Bill Self at Kansas. Now, that's obviously in jeopardy tonight because we know Houston's a very, very good basketball team, very capable of winning in there. And Houston, if they don't win in there, they would lose their 3rd straight game. So like the spot people have to just be in shambles here, Rob, because I have a feeling they want to bet both of these teams. Kansas coming off a loss, an ugly loss. That was one of the more surprising results of the weekend. Kansas just getting blown out at home by Cincinnati. And then I think we Houston came up on our show on Saturday with Kelly. That was almost just as surprising. I know Arizona's a really good team, and you should never be surprised if the Arizona Wildcats win a game. But I felt like Houston was just in sort of like the perfect setup to win that game over the weekend. and they dropped their second straight game. So two teams coming in, both in the spot, Rob. What do you make of that, Houston and Kansas out of Fieldhouse?
Yeah, I guess we take the spot, we crumple it up, and we throw it in the garbage can and move on to what's next on the list of handicapping angles, Adam, because you're right. Who wouldn't want Houston off of two consecutive losses? Of course you would, but then again, like you say, you have to deal with Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse on Monday night, off a loss themselves, a loss in which Flory Badunga said, I guess that we didn't respect them in terms of Cincinnati, their opponent the other day. Bill Self, very quick to hop in and say that he doesn't agree with that assessment, but that's a player telling you that we overlook Cincinnati. Not good, but it probably means that they'll be fired up here. They out of the tunnel, revved up. Kelvin Sampson, more of the level-headed approach here. Don't get too high off, or don't get too low off of losses. Don't get too high off of wins was one of his quotes. It's part of a journey, and you got to accept losses at times. That being said, Houston, they were always pushing uphill in that game. I mean, there was never a moment where Houston had any sort of control of that game against Arizona. Fall way behind, try to fight back, fall back behind, try to fight back, fall behind, try to fight back. They just, in the end, they just didn't have it. And statistically, it wasn't a horrible offensive game for the Houston Cougars. I mean, they didn't shoot well from three, but they held Arizona to 25% from three. So there was no real advantage there. The advantage, unlike most Houston games, the advantage that you can find is inside the arc, where Arizona made 22 shots for 44 points from two, and Houston only made 12 for 24, outscored by 20 from 2-point range. Is very unlike Houston. And then I guess the other thing to consider in that game was the turnovers by the Houston Cougars. 18.5% of their possessions went by the wayside of turnover. For Arizona, only 5 turnovers. And I'll just, for Arizona, for 1 second, I think I said this once before, but we don't say it enough, that the guard play of Jaden Bradley and Braden Burris, especially Bradley with his ball handling, has been, talk a lot about point guards on this show, Adam. He's one of the best point guards in the country. That goes a little bit under the radar. So brings us to this game where I think Houston probably wins the glass edge here against Kansas. I would believe they're the better rebounding team overall. They're going to have to make threes, though, Adam. It seems to me that Houston has become more dependent on the three this year than any year in recent memory. And I think it's because they shoot them better. They've got more capability from the outside, more weaponry, more options, so to speak. But they're going to have to make shots right away, get the Kansas crowd out of it. It's not an easy thing to do. Darren Peterson, 32 minutes of, I don't know, ho-hum basketball against Cincinnati, 1 of 7 from 3, not great. I'd expect a bounce back out of him. So, you know where I'm kind of pushing toward here, and I'm kind of pushing toward this game going over the total. Houston's defense, as good as it is statistically, when I've watched it 6, 7, 8 times now, Houston can still be beaten defensively. And it occurs more often, I will say, than what I've seen in the past, where teams get good shots off against Houston. So Kansas, a team that will play with a little bit of tempo at times. You want to try and run against Houston. This number's been pushed from 135.5 all the way to 138. I'm looking now, so we can be current. I'm looking at 138.5. So there's some agreement with the over. And wow, I'm just going to say that we're repetitive about this every single day, about how lines move during our 60 minutes on the show. But this game was just hit backwards again. Houston was 2.5 down to 1.5. Yeah, you're seeing it. Yeah, they get hit hard. The home underdog now only taking 1.5 rather than 2.5. That's a tough call, Adam. I'll give you the floor, obviously, to talk more about side. But for me, if I had to, I could see something in the vicinity of a 71-68 game, which is what you need to get paid here if you're playing over. Probably enough fouls to get you there, too, in this one. So that's where I'll lean. I haven't played yet, but that's where I'll lean.
Yeah, so that is, the current, like you said, we do this show in the window where a lot of these games start to move, limits increase, so on and so forth. And for me, like I'm tempted to just come in and take Houston right now. Like that's kind of how I wanted to play this regardless. I obviously, wasn't dying to lay 2.5. That's a tough number to lay in a game like this. But as you said, as we are looking at this on the show, Kansas gets hit. My guess is Kansas is getting hit. So someone then can come and bet Houston the other way and not have to lay the 2.5. I think that someone is going to be me as we talk about this, because again, it comes down to, I still think Houston is like the better of these two teams. I think you made a great point about Houston defensively being not quite the team that got to a possession or two away from winning the NCAA tournament last year. I don't think they're quite as good defensively, but Kansas, I think, has some issues offensively that got sort of brushed to the side because they had these like great games back to back. So I'll highlight the games that I think the pair of games against BYU and Arizona really like skyrocketed Kansas's ranking to the point where they're a little bit overvalued right now. If you go back to the BYU game, of course, like we have hindsight now to kind of say, man, maybe BYU, maybe this wasn't it this year for them. They weren't, Rob, you had talked about this a lot. They weren't very deep. Once teams kind of figured out they could like double Devanza if they wanted to, it became apparent that it was Richie Saunders. And so that I'm going to include Richie Saunders because he was still there in that game. He almost brought BYU back in that game. And then Rob Wright, and that's kind of it. So, that was one of those big wins for Kansas. And then the other one was, well, they had two. The Texas Tech game where Peterson kind of hit those two big threes and stole it. And then, of course, beating Arizona without Peterson. And because those results all came so close to each other, I think we sort of threw Kansas up into this like elite territory when they're not actually quite that elite of a team, right? Like they're outside the top 40 in offensive efficiency on KenPom. That would you have got that offhand, Rob? If I was like, is Kansas, would you have guessed that they're outside the top 40 offensive efficiency right now with some of the wins they've had of late?
Yeah, I probably would have taken a moment to think about it and then said no, because I think about games without Peterson in the lineup. So I probably would have thought about it for a second. But you're probably right. I would have thought no, they're inside the top 40 would have been my idea.
Yeah, so, I think that maybe lets the Houston defense off the hook ever so slightly. Of course, we are judging Houston, on, over the weekend. Even like Arizona's been pretty much a top 5 offensive and defensive team all season. And so now you turn around to play Kansas. Yes, you're at Allen Fieldhouse. I understand how difficult it is to go in there, but who's to say Kansas can't go in there and win, Rob? It was almost impossible to win at Fertitta Center, and Arizona turned around and did it in what wasn't the best spot for Arizona this weekend. I'm with Steve. And here's the thing. I bring up the spot like facetiously. I think people overrate the spot big time, like just in general. Like you can't just be betting spots in college basketball. It's a good way to go broke real quick. He says, screw the spot method here. Both teams have it. Houston is better. Expect a nail biter. I'm certainly in on the Houston is better. Like if I'm just straight up power ranking these teams, I got Houston pretty significantly ahead of Kansas at this point. Houston's a team that I've got in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. I don't have Kansas in the top 10 in either. So the question becomes, how much are you going to factor in Allen Fieldhouse, right? And for me, even with giving the maximum home court bump to my number, so I've got my number, and then I will subtract or add based on home court. If I give Kansas the maximum bump for home court here, I'm still at Houston minus 3.2, right? So, and that would be, I think we can both agree that Allen Fieldhouse deserves the max bump. If you're not giving Allen Fieldhouse on a Monday night the max bump, who are you giving maximum home court to, right? But even with that max, I'm still at Houston being like slightly over a 3-point favorite. So I'm sort of sitting here like I can get a Houston money line minus 125. I don't know, but Rob, it's going to be hard to pass up. It's all in the phone. I haven't clicked it yet, but I have a feeling that's going to be my parlay, and it may make my my card as well. We'll the good news is we've got time today. There's not as many games. We're going to have big time opinions on. So I'm going to think about that one for a second. But after that Kansas money has come in, I'm leaning pretty heavily toward just taking that Houston money line in the minus 125 range.
Yeah, if this thing comes down to shooting threes, Adam, you got to pick your group of three, right? If you're Houston, do you want Fleming, Sharp, and Uzan, that three, or do you want Peterson, Council, and Trey White? It's so even, and it's so hard. It's such a variable to predict who's going to shoot threes better. However, it's hard to kind of quantify the differences between this team. And I did get done, and I don't want it to be out of context. I got done saying Houston doesn't look to be the same type of defensive force that they've been in the past. And I think that's true. But I don't want anybody to think that I sell their toughness short here. And I think that's the place where when I think of this game, Adam, it's kind of, if I land on Houston, that's kind of the place where I land on their side is toughness. Like, I feel like they're going to get the loose ball over Kansas. I feel like they're going to get the second chance over Kansas. You know what I mean? They're just Kansas to me doesn't register as an elite level, physically tough team, mentally tough team. And I'll praise Melvin Council Jr. again. I just went on and on about Bradley for Arizona, but Melvin Council Jr. has been phenomenal for this team. I'd expect him to show up big. But when we do numbers, ratings, and all this other stuff, you can't really quantify toughness, all the stuff that doesn't show up in the box, but that's where I land as Houston being the better team. Anything that's not inside the box score, Houston's probably better at than Kansas, and the venue's not going to affect Houston any.
Yeah, there's really never been probably a better intangibles guy than Kelvin Sampson since he showed up at Houston. I mean, you want to talk about a team that just gets it done in like the gray areas. They do it as pretty much as good as anyone. And also his ability to game plan. I don't think he's going to be thrown off by Peterson in, Peterson out. Actually, I think if Peterson is in, it's almost even better. I think he'll have a great game plan for that. So I have not bet this yet. It is certainly the way I'm leaning. I'm going to kind of probably think about it throughout the show. If I do play it while we're on the show, I will certainly let you know. And that'll bring me to another one that I'm kind of, right there on. It's the other primetime game. And Rob, we've got Louisville heading to North Carolina. I started to get, actually, we were on the show with Kelly on Saturday. I was getting texts about this, and then someone actually asked in the chat. And so I said, like, I think Kelly phrased it like, Trig, do you agree with Syracuse getting all sorts of sharp money?
Yeah.
At which point I said, no. I said, I don't know why anyone would want this corpse of a basketball team getting to win the game. Like, I understand maybe wanting to go against North Carolina, but then again, it was right around the time, Rob, where reports were coming out that Henry Vesar might play. I'm probably destroying his name. Apologies in advance. And sure enough, NC went in to the Carrier Dome, the JMA Wireless Dome, whatever you want to call it, and gets an easy win, 77-64. Vesar plays 25 minutes, 19 points. So clearly, he was a factor. And again, I just could not understand the Syracuse love for that game. Now, I didn't really want to go against it because I'm still over here like, okay, like UNC might be a little bit vulnerable. We saw the game against NC State. They didn't have much, right? Like, that was the game where they're without two of their top players, and they get just rolled 82-58 by an NC State team that hasn't exactly just been pumping people by margin recently. So, the game before that, Pitt, UNC ends up being able to win that game by double digits without Caleb Wilson, who will still be out. And then Vesar is obviously back. So I'm over here liking Louisville. Okay. I want to like Louisville because I do think Wilson being out is going to matter against like better competition. And Pitt and Syracuse are in such a bad place right now that I just don't know that either of those teams truly could expose NC being a little bit shorthanded. But the problem here is Louisville hasn't been the same team on the road, and they're going to have to go into the Dean Dome tonight. God, does this feel a little bit like the game we just talked about? Just a little, right? Like, so what do we do with this one? NC Louisville. Do you have any interest in the road team, or do you think it's the Heels?
Yeah, the problem with these two games, Adam, is that we don't have a 2-game series, so we don't have anything to look back on, reflect on a first meeting between these two. You know what I mean? This is the first meeting between Louisville and UNC. It's the first meeting between Houston, Kansas. So you have to go into it a little bit half blind without that type of data to go back and look at. But it's at the point in time where these games mean everything. These two teams tied in the ACC for 6th place, but only the top 4 get the double bye. So both of these teams scrambling to get to one of those top 4 spots inside the ACC, and it's not beyond reach for either of them. They sit like a game out of third, both of these teams. So we know the way things can change within 1 week of conference play. You play twice. One team goes 2-0, you go 0-2. Boom, you get a complete reversal of standings. They're both in that spot where they're trying to get to the number 4 or better position. Let's back. And first of all, I've got your back because as the Full Court Press show tries to be one of everybody's favorite watches among college basketball shows during Monday through Friday, we want to make sure we get our pronunciations right. So I looked it up this morning because I was going crazy. I know I was saying it wrong. It's Henry. It's actually Henri. He's French, Henri, yeah. But we'll call him Henry because we're in the States. But Vesar, yeah. Henry Vesar, VESS-R. So we'll get it right the rest of the way. For those of you Tar Heel fans that are watching and are cursing us for butchering his name, it's Henry Vesar. He came back the other day, Saturday. And it is interesting. Like you say, we talked about this game on Saturday with Kelly. And to me, it's crazy how overreactive the market is, even with sharp money, to injury. There had been a report that Caleb Wilson was working on trying to get back for that game. He's working on how to play with the cast or whatever on his other hand, on his offhand. And he gets ruled out. Vesar, I think we all knew, was probably going to play. He did play. But the line 10 goes to Syracuse for no real reason other than injury. UNC blows them out. This is interesting because you talked about Louisville's road woes. This is the beginning of a 4-game stretch where they're going to play 3 on the road. And these 4 games are important, as I just spoke about in the standings. So for Louisville, they're going to have to learn to win on the road at the most crucial point in the season. For UNC, it's the opposite. They haven't been home much. They get 3 of the next 4 at home. Hubert Davis commented on Vesar returning to the lineup. And it's nothing, we're not breaking news here, but on the offensive end, he makes a difference for everybody else, obviously, because you can feed the post with him. And on the defensive end, now they're back to having 3 huge people at the rim. All of that talked about, Adam. I think the biggest difference in this game is UNC is the worst 3-point field goal percentage defense in the ACC. The worst. And what's Louisville going to do? They'll walk in there and bomb threes. Hit 14 the other day, shot 31. But Pat Kelsey's team will come in with Mikel Brown, with Javion, missing his last name now, and also with a host of 3-point shooters that, I don't know that UNC can stop them, to tell you the truth. And Louisville, for what it's worth, is going to throw up enough of them to where they're probably going to make double digits. Question is, can Louisville defend UNC on the other end? Honestly, I think they can. I think Louisville's the better team, Adam. Road woes aside, I just think they're the better team. Money has come toward, Louisville 1.5 up to 2.5. But between Brown and Conwell and company, I think they make enough threes to get it done here. And just to finish up the thought on UNC size, Louisville's got size too. Let's not forget, Louisville's not a small team by any stretch. So I don't know. Pace is going to be rapid. We're staring at 162 as a total. I could see them breaking that barrier as well. But I think Louisville is probably worth a shot here as the road favorite.
I wouldn't have gone digging through my closet for this sweet quarter zip if I didn't think Louisville was the better team here. Just to say that. But like, so I want to go back to a point you made, and I think this is part of the reason you see some of these quote unquote like sharp spots get overblown. Rob, you've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time, and you've been doing this, I mean, would put me to shame in the years you have in this business on me. And I can go back to, so I first started doing this professionally back in 2012. And even back then, it was hard. It was still harder to get quote unquote legitimate sharp information. Okay. Meaning, yes, theoretically. So I'm just going to use this example from North Carolina on Saturday. Yeah, theoretically, sharps may have played Syracuse for a reason that's unbeknownst to us. That could have been, they could have been setting up something. They could have been looking for a middle, or maybe they just, when I say they, typically a respected group, or, someone that's going to be able to get down enough places to move a number, or someone that was respected enough at a property to move the number. Like they have their reasons for Syracuse. Okay. And so that's, so we get the thing. Oh, well, Syracuse took sharp money. The problem is now this information is pretty easy to get. I mean, you literally can watch our show and Kelly's coming on and reading off a list that a sportsbook Art gave to her. Right. So it's like, it's not as big of a secret anymore. That's all fine and good. But what makes it tough is the fact that like everyone out there will run with this info. Right. And then maybe you do have a respected entity that played Syracuse, and then all these people piggyback it. And now suddenly it's starting to move the market past where it should. That's what I kind of have tuned that noise out now. I don't even really want to know, nor does it matter to me. Like you said, yeah, what is it? Probably hit like 50% of the time. So that can never be the case. Because again, of course, 50% of the time, I mean, a coin flips the same 50% of the time. So that can never be a reason for me. And I almost think that it's often overblown. In 2026, it's overblown. Like, and it could go both ways. You might have some, and especially now, I think that's what we're seeing within this hour of our show, Rob, is that some of the money that moves around isn't even legitimate to the respect where it's like a lot of it's just maybe setting up the ability to take the other side at a later point in time. That's kind of what I felt like happened with Houston here, or with Kansas. Kansas took money at the beginning of our show, knocked this down to 1 minus 1.5. I would be shocked if they don't come back and take Houston, because that's the side they actually want. Little bit of a kind of got off topic there, but I really, kind of thought that was the case with North Carolina. I guess I'll tie it back in with saying UNC was a team that, after the Duke win, I was like, all right, I do want to find a spot to play against this team. Of course, I didn't want Miami, but they continue to, I guess, prove me wrong. I don't think Miami's this great team, and yet they continue to get result after result. Since then, there really hasn't been a great spot to go against North Carolina, because you had big time inferior team with Pitt, big time inferior team with Louisville, with Syracuse. And then the NC State game where, yeah, you could have faded UNC, but you would have had to lay like 7 points. So this is really like the first good spot to do so, in my opinion, where you're getting a reasonable number with what I consider the clear better team. And if you can stomach Louisville on the road, which means they're going to have to make some shots. And I think that's, the tough part about this. I think Louisville is like the clear side that should win this game, but goes back to our initial discussion and really what has been the theme of the first half hour of the show. How much is UNC able to get up at home, and how much does the home spot matter? Because again, it's really tough to rule out North Carolina or Kansas winning their respective games in the environment that will likely be in these buildings tonight. Makes for a very interesting Big Monday, if you ask me, Rob.
Yeah, it doesn't. I've gone a little tirade about how we're going to get things right. I went back and looked up the, Henri Vessar. And then I wish, for those that watch us every day, and, we come with a lot of this stuff off the top of our heads. And I'm sure, Adam, you're the same way. And in the middle of talking half the time, breaking down games, there's so much going through my head. I'm kind of like jumping to the next point, to the next point, to the next point inside my head. You got to try and calm that down. And at some point, like in that cartoon Beavis and Butthead, the light bulb just short circuits, and I wind up calling Javon Hadley Javion Bradley. So bear with me a little bit. There's too many thoughts going on inside here. It's been 33 years, by the way, 1992, that I've been in this business. And to your point, real quick, I met a guy in Las Vegas when I first got to town, when I was living there for 11, 12 years. And he made that exact point to me. He told me, if you're playing line moves, if you're strictly walking up, you're like a $50 better, you're saying, oh my God, somebody knows something because the line moved on that game. If you're doing that exclusively, you're a 50-50 better. I think what people have to realize really quick is that line moves, they're classified as sharp all the time. Like we use the odds logic system, Adam, where half the time during the day, I hear this voice come up and say, sharp play, sharp play.
Yeah, that thing.
Play.
They made that update. That thing goes off every 2 seconds. I had to mute the sharp play voice. How many sharp plays can there be, Rob? It never stops, you know?
They're all sharp plays. But what you have to remember is even these sharp plays, the bookmakers win a lot of these plays too. So if you're bumping or if you're bucking a line move, you're not alone. The odds makers are on your side in that instance. So it works both ways. But real quick, apologies to Javon Hadley. We're doing our name pronunciation as best we can. And for UNC, last point I'll make about this game, because you said Louisville's going to have to make shots. I believe UNC's league worst three-point defense will have a lot to do with Louisville making shots. But if it comes down to the free throw line, Adam, one team shoots them really well, Louisville. One team shoots them not great at all, UNC. So if it comes down to the free throw line at the end of the game, could be a Louisville advantage as well.
All right, we will move on. Some good talk about the two big games tonight. And apologies if you're, still just as puzzled as we are. But I think we led you in a direction there. And like I said, I may use one of those as my parlay leg, but I'm going to give it till the end of the show. In the meantime, we're going to hit as much of the extra board as we can here over the next 25, 30 minutes. Double the firepower CBB package, get you all of my plays, all of Rob's plays. We have a 3-day option. If you email into customer support, they'll give you the rest of the season at a heavily discounted rate. And I can tell you right now, I haven't locked anything in yet for today. I will have a 5%er tomorrow, like pretty much as soon as I'm allowed to post it, which will probably be like first thing in the morning tomorrow. I will. I'm already working on Tuesday, and I've definitely got one that is likely 5%. So I suppose, if you do the 3-day, you'll know you're going to get a 5%er tomorrow. But there are options for today. So let's go to Garth. Appreciate the donation, Garth. And I didn't mean to push you off for 20 minutes, but I wanted to do a little double feature because we have two massive games followed by a very limited extra board today. But I know our guy Bayou Betts will be kind of fired up for this slate because it looks like the extra board is pretty much the Southland Conference in action. And so Garth wants to go out to Bayou Betts' is hometown, home area. I don't know if he grew up there, but I think he either went there or this is where he goes to games. Believe this is Hammond, Louisiana. Keith, correct me if I'm wrong. This is where Southeast Louisiana will host Texas A&M Corpus Christi tonight. And for Garth, he says, give me Corpus Christi -1.5. Bayou calls it Hammond, America. I love that. I still have to get down there, Keith. We'll probably next season. We will absolutely get to a C-Law game. It'd be nice if they were like, I try to go places when the teams are good. So 8-20 is not going to cut it. That's what Southeast Louisiana is on the season. I watched them play a day game not too long ago against East Texas A&M, and it was dreadful, Rob. They're now 5-14 in Southland play. They're in last place. I got to be honest, that's surprising to me. I did not have them finishing last in this league. I thought they were more of a middle of the pack team in this league. Corpus Christi coming into the year was one of the ones where I thought was like a little bit overrated by the name, because of course they've had some success of late. They get some name recognition. but they have been the far better of these two teams. So the question is, do you just roll with Garth and lay the very, very cheap money line or -1.5, or does that seem fishy to you? A&M on the road against the last place team, yet you just pretty much need them to win. Southland basketball on a Monday night. Do you have any thoughts there? And what about the total?
Yeah, well, you got one to look back on because Corpus Christi wins this game first time around 68-56. All aspects of that game go their way pretty much. There's no statistical category where Southeastern Louisiana was better than Corpus Christi on Corpus Christi's home floor. So, like I say, you do have that in your favor. And then, as somebody who usually, in past, let's say the last 10 years, somebody who's usually involved in the Southland Conference a little bit here, maybe the last 2 years even more because Will Wade was at McNeese, and I think a lot of my action was on McNeese games. But this year, I have not found myself drifting toward the Southland for action, even on totals, where obviously the majority of my thought process goes. Here, I think in simplistic terms, Corpus Christi, we said this about Houston being what we thought was the better team on the road as a road favorite. I feel like Corpus Christi is the better team on the road, short price road favorite. There's a couple of things in their favor. It's hard to expect teams to do you anything well as far as cashing tickets is concerned when they can't shoot the basketball. And Southeast Louisiana just is one of the worst teams in the league shooting the basketball inside conference games. The other side shoots it a little bit, especially from three, and they get to the free throw line. So those two things combined help you in a game like this. Total is where I would look in this, Adam, or at least it's the one thing that would have my interest. And even with my interest at 131, it seems like you can get games. I say this all the time in modern day basketball, up and over a price tag of 130.5, 131. However, the brutal shooting of Southeastern Louisiana stops me a little bit. And without enough background, I'll take what you said and bank it on how horrible it was to watch Southeastern Louisiana one time this year. But I can't trust their offense to do enough here. So for me, very, very weak siding with Garth here on the better team. And the last thing I'll say is where standings are concerned. It's important to Corpus Christi here. They sit in a position where they could actually climb up a couple notches in the standings this week. They're sitting at 5. They could get as high as 3 if things break their way. For Southeastern Louisiana, I'm not sure what there is to play for unless this is probably senior night down there. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the remainder of the schedule, but a lot of senior nights are going on. That kind of stuff helps sometimes in a one for the Gipper type game. I don't know that that's this, though. I would probably still look at Corpus Christi in this spot.
So, yeah, I'm with. So that's the only way I could play would be to just even though it's like one of those games where you could be kicking yourself for just playing like what appears to be the very obvious road like 1-point favorite. Listen, Corpus Christi comes off losses to Stephen F. Austin and then on the road to McNeese. Not many teams, like those are two teams that not many teams in this league are going to do better than 0-2 again. So no real shame there, right? Like, and over the weekend, they actually hung around with McNeese early in that game, and then it kind of got away from them. And I feel like they almost maybe mentally said, all right, this is kind of the result we expected, right? Because of course, McNeese, we've talked about this. McNeese is a team that has been a little bit vulnerable on the road this year, far more so than they were in the Will Wade era, but they're still taking care of business at home. So I don't think that Corpus Christi really probably felt like, they go into this road trip weekend, right? You're playing McNeese and you're playing Southeast Louisiana. Without a doubt, they have to be coming into this weekend saying, we can't lose the Southeast Louisiana game. We're hitting the road. We've got 2 games. It would be such a nice bonus to beat McNeese, but we got to split this trip 1-1, and we have to at least win the Southeast Louisiana game. Now, had that played out differently on Saturday, Rob, where A&M Corpus Christi found themselves in an absolute dogfight and then like lost by 1, I'd be less inclined to play them here, right? Because I'd be like, if they just had like this crippling defeat where they put everything into it and then had to turn around and play another road game, that's bad. But that's not what happened. McNeese pulled away in the second half. It was a 70-54 final. And I think mentally, Corpus Christi probably was able to start focusing on this game. So if you get any sort of like legitimate effort here from Texas A&M-CC, I don't see how they lose, right? It's Southeast Louisiana just doesn't put the ball in the basket. And we joked about this the other day. Still the name of the game here, Rob. It's still basketball.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what all the stat sheet says. If you cannot put the ball through the hoop, that's a problem. And that's a problem for Southeast Louisiana. And so, Garth, I think I'm with you on the Islanders in this game. Rob, before I jump back, I'll go to you. Do you have we'll probably talk about 3 more games over the next 20 minutes. Do you have a game in mind for the parlay that wasn't one of the 3 we talked about so far?
No.
Okay, that's all right. So we'll keep working through this, and let's do this. I want to talk about the Rio Grande Valley McNeese State game. That's one that's interesting to me. I see some people in the chat talking about that one, and then we'll kind of see where the discussion takes us the rest of the way. I'm with you, Rob. I think I'm probably going to end up using one of the games we've already talked about for the parlay. But the reason this one is interesting to me is I came into the season with sort of like a game plan of how I wanted to bet against McNeese State in Southland play. And what that game plan essentially was I want to take the teams. I basically rated put my ranking of the league with teams that I think were, I'll call them worthwhile teams, for lack of a better term, meaning teams that I thought could end up somewhere near the top half of the league. And my goal was to fade McNeese against these teams on the road. And it actually came out and it was awesome. We cashed the very first opening night of Southland play, gave it out on this show. Incarnate Word ends up beating McNeese State outright. The next spot came up. We actually cashed with that one as well. Houston Christian. They covered a double-digit spread where McNeese won by 10, but was never really up by that much. And then the next spot that came up was UT Rio Grande Valley, and McNeese State lost that game down in Edinburgh, Texas. So the reason I bring all of that up is McNeese has actually not been as good at home against these sort of better teams either. And, Stephen F. Austin's another one. We talked about it on this show where we started to notice that the value started to go south a little bit. If you remember, Bayou loved Stephen F. Austin in that game. And I said, man, but like all of a sudden, like McNeese, we're kind of being asked to like win this game now, not just like cover a number. And sure enough, Stephen F. Austin won that game 67-60. So I bring all of that up to say McNeese has now won 5 straight since that game. And they've done it in some cases by margin. They covered a big number at home against Incarnate Word. They didn't cover against Houston Christian. They smashed East Texas A&M, which is an atrocious team. Again, that's not surprising. Those are not the types of teams I want to play against McNeese State. Over the weekend, they covered against Corpus Christi, and I wonder if this is the spot to jump in and fade them, even though they're at home. So I am tempted to take the points here. And actually, I'm going to do it. You know what? I'm going to do it. This is going to be my parlay leg. I'm going to take Rio Grande Valley plus the 10.5. They won the first meeting, and it's on the heels of them sort of putting in a big second half to beat Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I think this game ends up being pretty competitive. So that's going to be my parlay leg. UTRGV plus the 10.5 points. Thoughts? And do you have anything for totals? Since, as you said, you've been on McNeese State from a total standpoint for a couple of years now.
A couple of things to talk about here that probably support the case for Rio Grande. They won the first time around, but you counter that by saying this is a pretty good McNeese revenge spot. So in that game, Adam, really quickly, they had a 41-18 lead Rio Grande Valley did, up by 23 against this team. I'd like to know the last time, has to be prior to Will Wade, when McNeese was ever down by 23 to anybody. But McNeese is also dealing with, I'm trying to get confirmation as we speak, a pretty significant injury here to Javon Garcia, who didn't play on Saturday. Third leading scorer on the team, second best three-point shooter on the team, obviously a big factor, did play in this game the first time around against Corpus Christi. In that one, he didn't play as big of a role in that one, 6 points in that particular contest. Still makes McNeese a little bit depth shy if he can't play. And calling McNeese depth shy is probably a bad term because they run so many guys out there. It's been like a constant from Will Wade till now where they play multiple players, but it takes away one starting piece here for them. We'll see if it has a bearing on the game. But Rio Grande Valley is the best shooting team in the league. Number one shooting twos, number one shooting threes. I mean, they bring a definite force to this game that has to be reckoned with, especially in this price range. And whether or not McNeese State has revenge or not, winning by 10 is a pretty big hurdle to clear against a team that's playing as good as anybody right now. I think when I just looked, Rio Grande had lost one game in like their last 13 or 14 games, just one time. So you got a couple of really hot teams here at this point in time. I think that Rio Grande plus points, even though they're on the opponent's home floor, even though the opponent is the best team in the league and they have revenge, but the injury situation may be a little bit here. And I think your overall point that you made way back in November and just reiterated here is kind of valid, with that maybe McNeese against teams that can push back against them is just a little bit overpriced. This entire league can't push back against McNeese. They get steamrolled, but teams like Rio Grande, who have capabilities, especially on the offensive end for this team, maybe catching a couple too many here. So I would lean that way as well. And we'll take that home as part of the parlay here. Let's go get it.
Yeah, I was starting to look through the standings here and do this off. So right now, your top four in the Southland is Stephen F. Austin, McNeese is in second, then you got Rio Grande and New Orleans. And of those four teams that have sort of emerged as the top four, at least coming into play today, McNeese has covered one of those games, and they covered by 0.5 point against New Orleans. And I think depending on, there may have even been a scenario where you could have, if you got a good number with New Orleans that you may have covered because they covered by 0.5 point. So again, didn't lose outright to UTRGV the first time. They don't cover either of the games against Stephen F. Austin. They're 13-0 at home this season, but that's so deceiving, Rob, because it's like they've won a lot of these games, but haven't done it by margin. And the ones they do win by margin is like the bottom half of this league, which is really bad. So like when you get down to the very bottom of this league, the East Texas A&Ms, the Southeast Louisianas, like, those are just bad basketball teams. And again, I think you're talking about like 10.5 is probably the right number, 10.5. But this is one where I'm kind of like just willing to trust what I saw in the first meeting. Bayou says it could be a sneaky over. I don't disagree with that. So again, I'm going to roll with the plus 10. There's not as much on this slate today. And, as far as the games we've talked about so far, it's probably my, I want to let the board move around for the big games a little bit more. So that those might actually end up being a client play for me. But for the show, we'll go with plus 10. Of course, we start talking about it and it goes from 10.5 to 10. And there's some spots that are even at 9.5. So who knows if that's us or if that's some other folks seeing like a big number. But yeah, Rio Grande plus 10 parlay leg for me.
And that push, Adam, could be somebody knowing something about Garcia. I knew.
Yeah, great point.
When I said it, it was wrong because I had in my notes here, Garcia was a factor in the first game. And when I was talking, I had the wrong box score pulled up saying he only scored 6 against Rio Grande the first time. And it's not the case. He had 19. Like I said, I knew my notes had him as a significant piece here. And if he doesn't go, and losing your second best 3-point shooter, et cetera, out of that starting unit. Yes, McNeese is deep, but I don't know. It seems like Rio Grande Valley would have enough offense to push back here against them and cover that type of number.
All right, Rob, let's do this. Let's talk about the other two top Southland teams in action today. I saw someone in the chat note that Stephen F. Austin is 15-0 at home this year. Stephen F. Austin is pretty much it's borderline guaranteed to win the league at this point. They are a 12.5-point home favorite against New Orleans, who's in fourth right now. So what that should tell you, I mean, there would have to be, like, mountains would have to move for them to not win this league. Because even next week when they're on the road, it's Houston Christian and Incarnate Word. I've got to believe that it would be shocking to me if Stephen F. Austin loses one more. And if they lose one more, they've still won the league by themselves because, of course, they're 18-1 in league play and McNeese is 16-3. With that being said, New Orleans, this was a team that they skewed their rating on night one of the college basketball season by beating TCU. So to me, like, I'm actually a little bit surprised that they've been able to keep this up in conference play. Like, I thought this was a team that was probably going to regress based on what they did in the non-conference, which is, of course, not only did they beat TCU, they beat Tulane. That's another really good win. They took Mississippi State into overtime. I believe Mississippi State needed like a 3 to either tie or win that game. So I'm actually kind of, I guess, pleasantly surprised with New Orleans that they've been able to, sort of factor into this league. I thought they'd fall back to the middle of the pack. So they now go to the top team in this league, who's been an absolute monster at home. Is there any way you could take those points, or do you think Stephen F. Austin is just too good?
Well, if you want to take them and you go through Stephen F. Austin's Southland Conference game logs, you find out that they've only won by this amount 4 times in 16 games. They've won a bunch of games, but they haven't won a bunch of games by 13. And New Orleans, actually, that game took a severe reversal. New Orleans had a 10-point lead that turned into a 14-point deficit in the second half, so 24-point swing. In no way, shape, or form do I want to be against Stephen F. Austin at this point in time. And to your point, Adam, let's just use the try and get inside, because we've done enough of this over the years. I think you mentioned that earlier. To try and at least be inside the mindset of a team. For Stephen F. Austin, league clinching is probably going to come at some point. And when you're in this type of league, Southland, league clinching isn't everything. Then you have to go win the Southland tournament. Otherwise, you don't go to the NCAAs. End of story, right? As good as their season has been, if they don't win the conference tournament, or even if they get tripped up here at the end of the season here and wind up with 4 losses, it would be tough if they didn't win the conference tournament. That being said, you'd expect full attention on this game, and then maybe a little more of a lackadaisical effort against the has-beens that they're going to play next week. Maybe their final game, they take it a little bit easier. I got to look here and see if it's at home, because that won't be the case. Now, see, they wrap up on the road. Houston Christian might be a game where you could get to the dog, thinking that, Stephen F. Austin isn't going to apply themselves. But I don't know that this is one of those type games. All that said, New Orleans has made a focal point with the money provided by Master P to try and become a better program. And as you said, they've stepped up a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to lay 12.5 in this game. I think if it were me, I'd be a little bit more comfortable here playing the Stephen F. Austin team total at home, which is 81.5. I'd feel a little more positive about them getting to 82 against this New Orleans defense, which hasn't been great so far this season inside the league. They rank near the bottom, or at least in the bottom half. So without Stephen F. Austin proving that they can win by this margin enough, only winning by this margin, 4 out of 16 is 25% of the time. It's hard to back that and lay 12.5. In fact, we'll go back to talking about McNeese being overvalued. At this point in time, is Stephen F. Austin a little bit overvalued as far as home favorite role is concerned? So I'd probably let that pass. I would think New Orleans might be able to sneak in under the number, and maybe a look at the Stephen F. Austin team total in what bettors at least think is going to be a pretty high scoring game, because the total was set high to begin with, but it's been pushed even higher now. I'm looking at some 150.5 off of a 149 opener. So a little movement toward the full game over here.
Yeah, I think you're paying a pretty big premium to back Stephen F. Austin here. This was a 5-point game in the first meeting.
Yeah.
They are, I mean, my number is closer to 9. So 12.5, it's like, I think you're paying a pretty big tax for senior, quote unquote, do they even call it senior night anymore? Like, half these guys don't stay at the same school for 4 years, but let's call it the last home game of the year. Undefeated home record, which is what Stephen F. Austin will be going for tonight. They're 15-0 at home. They'll probably get win number 16. But I guess here's what I think is maybe overblown a little bit and overbaked into the number. This is their 4th straight road game. But if you know how this league plays, like they're always going to play in pairs, right? It's going to be a Saturday, Monday league most of the time. So yeah, they are on their 4th straight road game for New Orleans, but it's like, okay, that's just back-to-back road trips. It's going to happen to everyone at least once for the most part in conference play. I don't know that that's like a crazy, horrible spot for them. Quick trip over to the Texas schools, and then now you're taking, I'm sorry, two trips to Texas for New Orleans, which is not horrible travel. So I think this is a big number. I would look to take the dog here as well. All right, Rob Bino, they would like to know what your parlay leg is. They said the Rio Grande Valley spread is moving a little bit. Listen, I'll attach juice to it so we can still get our 10 or 10.5 in the parlay. So what do you got, Rob? What are you going to lock in for the 2-teamer today?
I'll go back to one of the big games, Adam. And again, I didn't play either of these as of yet, but I'm going to go to instinct here on this one. We talked at length, dissected these games, almost every detail of these games. And the odds makers at this time of year do a really good job of setting numbers straight. But I'm going to play the Louisville team total over, Adam. It's just, for me, by the way, the number is 81.5, over -120. So again, for those of you guys out there who only have a single outlet, Adam says this all the time. If your single outlet is going to show you 82.5, just alt play it back and lay the 20 cents. The consensus number.
I'll price it in. I'm going to put -120 on both parlay legs, so you have the room to do that. Yeah.
There you go. Because again, across the 30 books that we're allowed to see here on the Odds Logic screen, the consensus number pops up as 81.5 over -120. Give you a couple of reasons why. The biggest reason, I think, is the Louisville 3-point shooting. I just don't see North Carolina. They haven't been able to defend the 3 all season long. And it's kind of not close, Adam. Like, the percentage of threes that they're giving up inside league play is 39.4. And the next worst team is Miami at only 38%, when there's a 1.5% gap. That's a huge gap. It may not look like a lot, but that's a huge gap disparity. So it shows you how bad North Carolina has been. And as I said earlier, between Hadley, Conwell, Brown, all these guys that just shoot threes. And then at the same time, you get a lot of mid-range or to the rim stuff with these guys. So I know North Carolina protects the rim. It's what they're best at. They're not necessarily a shot blocking team, more of a shot altering team than blocking team. But Louisville's going to find their way to the line, in my opinion. I think they're going to sink some threes here. And the pace is what sold me on this one most of all, is that North Carolina is going to be rapid fire. It just amazes me how far we've come this year with this particular team, thinking that they might be more defensive oriented. They're not. So give me Louisville team total up and over 81.5.
All right. Went a little longer on a couple of these today because there's only so many games. We will be back tomorrow. More of your traditional full court press show. But appreciate you guys hanging with us today. 2-teamer for today. We'll go Rio Grande Valley +10, and we'll go Louisville team total over 81.5. Enjoy your Monday, everyone. Rob and I will be back 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for more Full Court Press.